Her eyes flew open just as the heart monitor screamed. She tore the oxygen tube from her face. She looked past the nurse and rasped, "Where is Daniel? He promised me he would be here." No one answered. Her mother just covered her mouth and started crying. Because this story doesn't let go, not even at the end. Amelia Hart tried to sit up, but her body felt like it belonged to someone else. Heavy, weak, and wrong. 2 nurses rushed in. A doctor said something about remaining calm, about motor response, and about a miracle. But Amelia heard only one thing missing from the room. Daniel, her husband, was never late. He wasn't late for big things, not for storms, and not for the birth of their daughter. He wasn't late for the anniversary dinner he once drove through a flood to make. She had cried over a stupid argument, and he said, laughing, "I would swim across a highway before I let you go to bed thinking I don't love you." So where was he now? "What happened?" she whispered. The doctor leaned closer and said, "Amelia, you were in a car accident." Her throat burned. She said, "No, I know that. I mean, what day is it?" The room went still in a way that felt violent. Her mother's shoulders shook harder. The doctor took a breath he should have taken outside, not in front of her. He said, "It is July 20th. Amelia swallowed and asked, "What year?" No one wanted to be the one to say it. When they did, the number didn't sound real. 5 years. 5 whole years had been taken from her in a single sentence. She stared at the ceiling as if it might disagree. 5 years. 5 summers. 5 birthdays. And 5 Christmas mornings. 5 years of her daughter growing up without her. 5 years of Daniel waiting beside a bed, unless he hadn't. "Call him," she said more firmly this time. "Call my husband." Her mother let out a broken sound. Amelia slowly turned her head toward her. That was when fear replaced confusion. Because there are tears of relief, and then there are tears of guilt. "Mom," Amelia said, her voice thin and sharp. "Where is Daniel?" Her mother looked down at her own hands and said, "Honey, no." Amelia's pulse quickened. She said, "No, don't do that. Don't soften your face like that unless something is wrong. Where is he?" The doctor stepped back. He knew this wasn't medicine anymore. This was damage. Her mother tried again and said, "You need to rest first." Amelia's eyes hardened. She asked, "Where is my husband?" Her mother closed her eyes quietly. Like she was confessing to a crime in church, she said, "Daniel isn't your husband anymore." Amelia stopped breathing for a second. The monitor didn't. It screamed for her. She blinked once, then twice. She asked, "What does that mean?" "It means," her mother's voice cracked, "things changed." "No." Amelia shook her head, panic rising fast. She said, "No." "Changed how? Divorced? Dead? Missing? Don't say things like that and then stop talking." Her mother stood up so abruptly the chair scraped the floor. She said, "He is alive." Amelia's chest loosened for half a heartbeat, then tightened again. She asked, "Then why is he not my husband?" Her mother looked toward the doorway, and Amelia followed her eyes. A little girl stood there in a yellow cardigan, clutching someone's hand. The little girl had Amelia's eyes. Amelia's mouth fell open. Rosie. Her daughter had been 3 years old the last time Amelia saw her. She had chubby hands, baby curls, and juice on her shirt almost every morning. Because she refused to hold the cup with both hands like a reasonable human being. Now she was 8. She had an older face, longer legs, and guarded eyes. And the hand Rosie was holding belonged to Amelia's younger sister, Lena. Lena stepped into the room like every inch of air had turned to glass. She looked older, too, and tired around the eyes. She was beautiful in the infuriating way some pain makes people beautiful. And on her left hand, where it caught the hospital light without mercy, was Amelia's wedding ring. Amelia stared at it, then at Lena, then at Rosie. Amelia asked, "Why are you wearing my ring?" Rosie hid behind Lena's leg. Lena's lips parted, but nothing came out. Amelia's voice dropped to a whisper that sounded worse than a scream. "Why are you wearing my ring?" That was when Rosie looked up. She said softly, innocently, and devastatingly, "Mom." Amelia flinched like she had been slapped, not because Rosie had spoken, but because she hadn't meant her. The room tilted. "Get her out," Amelia said. Nobody moved. "Get her out." Rosie burst into tears. Lena picked her up immediately, but Amelia didn't miss the way Rosie buried her face in Lena's neck. She did it with the instinct of a child who knew exactly where safety lived, and that almost broke her more than the ring. When the room cleared out, when the crying faded into the hallway, when the machines were the only things left brave enough to make noise, Daniel finally came. He stopped in the doorway, And for a moment, Amelia saw it all on his face at once. Shock, relief, and shame. He had more gray at his temples now. His shoulders looked heavier, but it was him, the man she had built a life with, the man whose last name she took, the man she had asked for first. She expected herself to feel love. Instead, she felt something colder. Daniel stepped closer and said, "Amelia." She recoiled so hard the ivy line tugged. She said, "Don't." His eyes filled immediately. It almost would have worked on her if she hadn't seen the ring on her sister's hand 10 minutes earlier. "You married Lena?" He shut his eyes. That was answer enough. Amelia let out one laugh, short and horrified. She said, "I was in a coma." He replied, "I know. You married my sister while I was in a coma." His jaw tightened. He said, "It wasn't like that." The anger in her came alive all at once. She said, "Then tell me what like that looks like." He looked wrecked. He also looked careful. That combination made her sick. "I waited," he said. "For years. Amelia, I waited. I sat by this bed until doctors stopped giving us hope. Rosie needed a mother. She needed stability. Lena was already helping." One thing became another. Amelia interrupted, "And my wedding ring ended up on your finger." He flinched. "Good." She leaned forward, trembling with the effort. She asked, "How long?" His silence told the truth before his mouth could lie. Amelia stared at him. "How long, Daniel?" "After 2 years," he said. She kept looking at him. He looked away. She said, "Not after 2 years. Then earlier. Much earlier." A memory flashed through her mind like lightning behind a cloud. Rain on a windshield. Her phone lighting up. Lena's name on the screen. "Please come alone. I need to tell you what Daniel's been doing." Amelia grabbed her head. Daniel stepped forward. "What is it?" he asked. She snapped, "Don't touch me." He froze. Good again. The next few days came in pieces. Pain medication, physical therapy, and a mirror she wasn't ready for. The shock of seeing the scar near her hairline. The deeper shock of seeing time in her own face. And every time the door opened, a new wound walked in. Her mother with casseroles and guilt. Her aunt with pity dressed as positivity. Lena with careful eyes and folded hands, as if she were waiting to be sentenced. Daniel with flowers that Amelia asked the nurse to throw away. But the cruelest wound came on the 4th day, carrying a crayon drawing. Rosie stood by the bed and looked at Amelia like she was looking at a teacher she had met once. "I made this," she said. Amelia reached for it too quickly. Her fingers shook. She said, "Thank you, baby." Rosie didn't move closer. On the paper was a house, a son, a dog Amelia didn't recognize, and a family of 4. Daniel, Lena, Rosie, and a little boy. Amelia's throat went dry. She looked up and asked, "Who is that?" Rosie answered with a smile. "That is Ollie. He is my brother." The room went soundless. Daniel had a son with Lena. A whole other child had been born while Amelia lay frozen in a hospital bed. And somewhere in that time, people had smiled, bought balloons, and cut a cake. They passed the baby around, chosen godparents, argued over names, and taken family pictures. A whole life had happened without even asking her permission to move on. Rosie brightened. She said, "He can say dinosaur, but not spaghetti." Amelia nodded, because if she opened her mouth, she would howl. When Rosie left, Amelia didn't cry right away. She waited until the door closed. Then she folded in half and cried so hard the nurse had to sedate her. That night she woke alone and disoriented. She was choking on old grief and new humiliation. There was a small box on the bedside table. Her mother had brought it from storage. It had things found in Amelia's car after the accident. A bent keychain, a cracked lipstick, an earring with the back missing, and her old phone. It was dead and shattered, but still hers. Amelia turned it over in her hands as if it might pulse with answers. By morning, she knew one thing with perfect certainty. The accident hadn't been just an accident, not in the way everyone wanted it to be. Something had happened before the bridge, before the rain, before the impact. Something bad enough that 5 years later, Daniel still couldn't meet her eyes when she asked how long. Rehab was brutal. Her legs felt like rumors. Her balance disappeared without warning. Once she made it 6 steps with the parallel bars and nearly fainted from the effort. Another day, she threw a rubber therapy ball across the room because her right hand refused to grip the way her brain remembered. Still, she kept going. Not because she was brave, but because rage is useful. And every time she wanted to quit, she remembered Rosie calling Lena Mom, like the word had never belonged to anyone else. On the 2nd week, Lena came alone. Amelia was by the window, learning how to stand without swaying. You shouldn't be here, Amelia said. Lena closed the door behind her. She said, You deserve answers. Amelia laughed bitterly. That is generous. Lena didn't defend herself. That made Amelia angrier somehow. How long? Amelia asked. Lena looked down. She said before the accident, there it was. Clean, cruel, and unhidden at last. Amelia felt the room narrow. She asked, How long before? Lena replied, A few months. A few months? Amelia repeated. You slept with my husband for a few months, and then you held my daughter's hand at my hospital bed. Lena started crying. Amelia hated that too. Lena said, It didn't start the way you think. Amelia replied, Please don't insult me while confessing. Lena wiped her face. She said, You and Daniel were barely speaking. He said you were done, that you just hadn't admitted it yet. Amelia turned so fast she nearly lost her balance. She said, So that made me dead? Lena said, No. Amelia said, Say it clearly. Her voice shook. What exactly made it okay? Lena looked shattered. She said, Nothing. It wasn't a why. Lena's answer came so quietly. Amelia almost missed it. Because I was lonely. Because he was kind to me when I was falling apart. Amelia asked, Because I was weak? Lena said, Because once I crossed the line, I kept lying to myself that I could step back before anyone got hurt. Her mouth trembled, and then you found out. Amelia went still. You knew I found out. Lena nodded. A memory flickered again. The text message, Come alone. I need to tell you what Daniel has been doing. Amelia stared at her sister. You sent that message? Yes. Why? Because I was going to tell you everything. Amelia's face hardened. At midnight in a storm? Lena swallowed. She said, I panicked. You had seen one of his messages pop up on my phone at dinner. I could tell. I thought if I got to you first, maybe I could confess before Daniel twisted it. Amelia felt dizzy. Did he know you texted me? Yes, and what? Lena said, and he called you over and over. Amelia closed her eyes. Rain. Headlights. Her phone vibrating in the cup holder. She asked, Did he chase me? Lena hesitated. That hesitation said enough. Amelia opened her eyes. Did he? Lena said, He drove after you. A cold wave went through her body. Not because it proved murder, but because it proved chaos. Because somewhere between betrayal and panic, people had made choices. And Amelia had paid for all of them with 5 years of her life. Get out, she whispered. 3 days later, Amelia learned her father was dead. Not from a solemn family meeting. Not from gentle preparation. But from a volunteer at the hospital who said, Your dad used to read to you every Thursday, didn't he? We all missed him after he passed. Amelia smiled automatically, then stopped understanding the sentence halfway through. Her father was the steady one. The one who never panicked. The one who taught her to drive, how to sand a table, and to leave any room where she was not respected. He had died 2 years earlier from a stroke. He had spent almost every evening at her bedside before that, and she had missed all of it. The funeral, the flowers, her mother becoming a widow, the first holidays without him. Amelia took the news sitting upright, eyes dry, and hands flat against the blanket. Then later alone, she found herself whispering, Dad, like a child who had woken from a nightmare too late for comfort. That was the first night Rosie came to see her without Daniel or Lena. The nurse had left the door cracked. Rosie slipped inside holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear bent down. I couldn't sleep, she said. Amelia wiped her face quickly. She said, Hey. Rosie studied her and asked, Are you crying? Amelia almost lied. Then she remembered what 5 years of lies had done to her life. Yes, she said. Rosie nodded as if that made sense. Me too, sometimes. Amelia patted the bed. Come here. Rosie didn't climb up, but she did come closer. My grandpa died, Amelia said softly. I know. Rosie hugged the rabbit tighter. I miss him too. Amelia smiled through a fresh sting. She said, He loved you more than anything. Rosie looked at her for a long moment. She asked, Did you know my moon song? Amelia blinked. What? Grandpa used to sing it. He said you made it up. Amelia's breath caught. When Rosie was a baby, Amelia used to walk the floor with her at 2 a.m. She would sing a nonsense lullaby about the moon getting lost and asking the window for directions. No one knew it except family. Amelia swallowed. She said, The one that goes, Moon got lost on Maple Street. Rosie's eyes widened. Amelia kept going, her voice shaking, knocked on every shutter, asked the sleepy sparrows sweetly, Which roof hides my mother? Rosie's mouth opened. Amelia continued, barely above a whisper now. Stars all laughed and pointed west. Night wrapped silver around her. Then the moon curled up by your little bed, because that's where love had found her. Rosie stared at her like the room had changed shape. You do know it, she whispered. Amelia nodded. I used to sing it to you when you wouldn't sleep. Rosie looked down at the rabbit. She said, Mama sings it different. There it was. The word Mama. This time it meant Lena. Amelia felt the pain, but she didn't show it. Instead, she asked, Can I tell you something? Rosie nodded. Amelia said, No one could ever take me from being the one who sang that to you first. Rosie didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. And that tiny stillness felt like the beginning of something. It also felt dangerous. Because once Amelia saw even the smallest crack in the wall between them, she needed more. She pushed harder in therapy, harder in memory work, and harder in truth. A week later, an old cloud backup from her cracked phone finally loaded at the hospital tech desk. One audio file had survived. The timestamp was from the night of the crash. Amelia listened alone. At first, there was only static and rain. Then Lena's voice crying, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. He said he was going to tell you after Rosie's birthday. He said you would be angry, but you would survive it. And I was stupid enough to believe that made me less awful. Amelia's hands started shaking. Then her own voice, sharp and furious. Stay away from my family until I get there. A car door slammed. A horn blared. Then Daniel's voice, faint through speakerphone. Amelia, slow down, please. Just pull over and let me explain. And then a scream. Tires. Metal. The audio cut. Amelia sat frozen after it ended. He hadn't pushed her off the bridge, but he had built the road to it. That evening, Daniel came carrying takeout she hadn't asked for and hope he didn't deserve. She played the audio before he even sat down. He listened without moving. When it ended, the silence between them felt almost holy. Then Amelia said, You were going to tell me after Rosie's birthday. Daniel dragged a hand over his face. He said, I was trying to figure it out. Amelia said, You mean trying to keep the house steady long enough to leave safely? No. You told her I would survive it. He looked up, eyes red. He said I was angry, unhappy, and lost. None of that excuses what I did. Finally, one honest sentence. He moved closer. He said, Amelia, I never wanted this. Not the crash, not your coma, Amelia replied, but you wanted her. He said nothing. She nodded slowly. That is what I thought. He sank into the chair. The truth, he asked. By the time you found out, our marriage had been broken for longer than either of us admitted. Amelia laughed in disbelief. She said, So this is where you blame me for your affair. I am not blaming you, he replied. She said, You just said we were broken. We were, he said. The words hit her harder than the betrayal had. Because betrayal at least still recognizes there was something worth betraying. Broken sounded convenient and disposable. Daniel rubbed his eyes. He said, You were always gone, Amelia. Even when you were home. Your projects, your deadlines, your phone at dinner, your exhaustion, your distance. She cut him off with a look so sharp it finished the sentence for him. I was building a future for us, she said. He replied, and I was drowning in the present. She stared at him. There it was, the coward's confession. Not I loved your sister. Not I destroyed our family. Just loneliness dressed up as justification. Amelia pointed to the door. Get out. He stood. But before leaving, he said the one thing that stayed with her all night. Rosie loves Lena. If you turn this into war, she is the one who loses. That line nearly broke her. Not because it was wise, but because it was true, and truth from the wrong mouth still wounds. For 2 days, Amelia considered disappearing from the fight entirely. Signing whatever papers would make things easy, and letting Rosie keep the only version of stability she remembered. Maybe motherhood wasn't biology. Maybe it was continuity. Maybe waking up didn't give Amelia the right to rip open a child's world just because hers had already been destroyed. Then her mother brought her a letter. It was in her father's handwriting. He had written several during the coma, hoping one day she might read them. In the last one, dated 6 months before his stroke, one line stopped Amelia cold. It read, I should have told you sooner what Daniel was doing. But I was foolish enough to think time would expose him without taking more from you. Below that, another line. When he came asking about divorce while you still hadn't spoken a word in 18 months, I saw clearly what kind of man he was. I am sorry I ever let him into this family. Amelia read that sentence 5 times. Divorce papers, while she was still silent in a hospital bed. The next breath she took felt different. Not softer, but clearer. This wasn't just about lost love anymore. This was about being erased while still alive. The confrontation finally exploded at Rosie's 9th birthday. Daniel and Lena threw it at the lake house Amelia had designed with her father. White lanterns on the porch, pink lemonade in glass dispensers, and children running over a lawn Amelia had once measured barefoot with a tape line between her teeth. She arrived with a cane she hated and a spine made entirely of refusal. The party quieted when people saw her. Some smiled too brightly, some looked away, a few whispered. Public humiliation has a sound. It sounds like politeness stretched too thin. Daniel walked toward her fast. He said, "You should have called first." Amelia smiled without warmth. She said, "It's my daughter's birthday. I thought I would risk being inconvenient." Lena appeared behind him, pale. Rosie saw Amelia and froze. For one terrible second, Amelia thought she might run in the opposite direction. Instead, Rosie walked over slowly. She was surrounded by watching adults and half-inflated lies. "You came," Rosie said. "Of course I came." Rosie twisted the hem of her dress. "Are you staying?" Before Amelia could answer, Daniel cut in. "Just for a little while, sweetheart. Amelia is still recovering." Amelia looked at him, then at Rosie. Then she crouched as much as her leg would allow and said gently, "I am staying as long as you want me here." Rosie nodded once. Then, in the bright, cruel middle of her own birthday party, she asked the question every adult had been trying to outrun. "Why didn't you come back for me?" Conversation stopped completely. The wind moved through the trees. Amelia felt every eye land on her. They were waiting to see whether she would choose ego, anger, blame, or truth. Her lips trembled. She reached for Rosie's hand. "I was trying," she said. "Every day. Even when I couldn't open my eyes. Even when I couldn't move. Even when no one knew if I'd ever wake up, I was trying to get back to you." Rosie's face crumpled. Amelia kept going, her voice breaking now. "I didn't leave you on purpose. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that, if you let me." Rosie burst into tears and threw herself into Amelia's arms. Amelia almost fell with the force of it. But she held on. She held on like she was pulling herself out of 5 years underwater. Behind them, no one breathed. Then Lena spoke. Not softly, not privately. Right there in front of the family, the neighbors, and the children pretending not to listen. "She's telling the truth," Lena said. Daniel turned and said, "Lena, no." Lena's voice shook, but it didn't stop. She said no more half-truths. She looked at Amelia, crying openly now. She said she found out about us before the crash. It wasn't something that happened years later. It started while they were still married. I texted her that night. I asked her to come. Daniel called and chased after her when she drove off. Her breath hitched. And after she didn't wake up, we told ourselves we were building a home for Rosie. But part of it was selfish. Part of it was guilt. Part of it was us wanting the life anyway. Daniel stared at her like he had never seen her before. Maybe he hadn't. Rosie slowly pulled back from Amelia's arms and looked at Lena. "You lied," Rosie said. Lena's face broke. She said yes. That one word did more damage than any scream could have. Daniel stepped forward, furious now, his reputation splitting in public. He said, "This is not the place for this." Amelia rose carefully, one hand on the table for balance. "Actually," she said, her voice steady at last, "it is exactly the place, because this was my home before it became your cover story." No one moved. Daniel looked around and finally saw it. The perfect little narrative was gone. The patient wife who never woke, the grieving husband who did his best, the loving sister who stepped in, gone. All that remained was what they had done. Rosie backed away from everyone and ran into the house. Lena went after her, but Amelia caught her wrist. She said, "Let me inside." Rosie sat under the staircase, knees to her chest, her birthday crown crooked on her hair. Amelia lowered herself beside her with painful slowness. Rosie didn't look up. She asked, "Do I have 2 moms?" Amelia swallowed the ache in that question. "You have one mother who gave birth to you and loved you before she saw your face," she said quietly. "And you have one woman who raised you when I couldn't. Those things can both be true." Rosie finally looked at her. She asked, "Do I have to pick?" Amelia closed her eyes for 1 second. This was the impossible choice. This was the place where bitter people create more bitter children. When she opened her eyes again, they were full but steady. "No," she said. "You never have to choose love like it's a side in a war. Rosie started crying again, but softer now. Then, so softly Amelia nearly didn't hear it, she whispered, "Can I call you Mom too?" Amelia's entire body gave out at once. Not collapsing, just surrendering to the weight of grace after too much pain. She kissed Rosie's hair. "You can call me anything you want," she whispered back. I came back for all of it. Months later, the lawyers would do what lawyers do. Custody papers, statements, and mediation. Daniel would lose more than he expected. Lena would leave him before winter and move into a small rental across town with Ollie. She was carrying guilt like unpaid rent in her chest. Nothing turned clean. Real life never does. But some things did turn true. Rosie started spending weekends with Amelia in a sunlit apartment. It was filled with rehab bands, unfinished tea, and the smell of cinnamon toast on Saturdays. Sometimes Rosie still cried for the old routine. Sometimes Amelia cried after she went to sleep. Sometimes Lena dropped Rosie off and stood awkwardly in the doorway, and the silence between the sisters felt like a wound learning not to bleed every time it moved. Healing was not beautiful. It was repetitive, humbling, and slow. But one night after Rosie fell asleep on the couch, with her head in Amelia's lap, the moon song half hummed and half forgotten on her lips, Amelia looked out the window. She understood something she hadn't been ready to understand when she first opened her eyes. The man she asked for first was the man who had helped break her life. The people she fought for after that were the ones who helped her rebuild it. And sometimes the cruelest awakening isn't opening your eyes after 5 years. It's realizing you should have stopped begging for the wrong person long before the darkness ever fell.